Watch right now on the Front News project. This weapon will strike the Kremlin. Flamingo cruise missiles, a new nightmare for Russia. Kursk region, the disposal of Russian mobilized soldiers continues. So is the so-called special military operation still going according to plan? And Putin's army is bogged down at the front. The Ukrainian armed forces are pressing the enemy on all fronts. Fiery, hot, and blazing footage from the front lines. Watch right now. It's the fourth year of the full-scale war that Putin's Russia started on Ukrainian soil. The Ukrainian armed forces continue to heroically defend not only their homeland, but the entire civilized world from the aggression of Kremlin war criminals. Greetings, this is Front News. I'm Volodymyr Timoshenko. For the next 30 minutes, you'll get the truth about the war, brought to you by our journalists from the hottest combat zones. So, are you ready? Then let's begin. And we're starting right away with exclusive material. Ukraine has begun serial production of the Flamingo cruise missile, which has a range of up to 3,000 kilometers. The new missile has a warhead twice as powerful as the legendary American Tomahawk missiles. This was reported by the Defense Express portal. More details about this new, very unpleasant surprise for Putin's Russia. Let's watch.
A warhead weighing a ton and a flight range well over 1,000 kilometers. Ukrainian photographer Yefrem Lukatsky, who collaborates with Associated Press, has published photos of the new Ukrainian long-range missile Flamingo.
Ukrainian-made Flamingo missiles with a range of over 3,000 kilometers, which have entered serial production, can be seen in the workshop of one of the country's leading defense companies, Firepoint, at an undisclosed location in Ukraine.
The caption under the photo states that it was taken on August 14th in the workshop of the defense company Firepoint. The photo shows the missiles in the workshop already prepared for shipment. It appears that the Flamingo may already be in serial production. Ukrainian official sources in the missile sector have long hinted that the Ukrainian defense industry is preparing a long-range surprise for the Russians. And apparently the Flamingo is exactly the surprise that was being talked about. According to military analysts, the missile is very simple to produce. And that's exactly what Ukraine needs right now.
This is excellent news. The missile is indeed simple. It can't be compared to the likes of Storm Shadow, Scalp, and so on. But in this case, we don't need a very complex guidance system. More modern American or British missiles have a visual guidance system that can home in on an infrared image, even when various counter-missile measures are used. In this case, we don't need that. Pavel Narozhny, military expert.
All known facts indicate that the so-called Flamingo is actually the already known FP-5 cruise missile from Millennium Group. The specifications, appearance of the missiles, and their descriptions are identical.
The capability to produce more than 50 missiles of this type per month. Such speed is achieved through an economic approach where, for the sake of mass production, they had to sacrifice complex design features like containerized launch and folding wings. The price for this is a longer pre-launch preparation, which takes at least 20 to 40 minutes. Nevertheless, given the capabilities of the FP-5, this is quite to be expected. The company also stated that the missile uses satellite navigation resistant to electronic warfare combined with an inertial guidance system, according to Defense Express.
The warhead of the Flamingo weighs 1 ton, which is twice as powerful as the American Tomahawk. Most importantly, it is designed for mass production. Russia systematically tries to knock out Ukraine's defense industry, and Ukraine needs to act in the same way, focusing on destroying the Russian military-industrial complex.
And it is enormous in size, and we see that most of these factories can be hit with cheap drones that fly not at 1,000 kilometers per hour like this missile, but at a speed of 200 to 250 kilometers per hour. So right now we need a large number of inexpensive means that can effectively destroy the Russian economy and military-industrial complex. And this missile is capable of doing that. Pavel Narozhny, military expert.
There have been no official statements from Kyiv about the new long-range Flamingo missile, and in this case, most likely, everyone will simply see the results of the Flamingo's strike on Russian military factories.
And now let's talk in more detail about the operational situation on the blazing Pokrovsk front. The situation here, as usual, is extremely tense. Since the beginning of the day, the occupiers have tried 42 times to advance on the positions of Ukrainian units in the Pokrovsk direction. The enemy attacked in the areas of the settlements of Poltavka, Volny, Novoishakovo, Zapovednoe, Novoekonomicheskoe, Myrolyubovka, Novokrainka, Lisovka, Zverevo, Kotlino, Udaknoe, Daknoe, and in the direction of Vladimirovka, Rodinskoe, Krasny Lyman, Pokrovsk, Novopavlovka, and Molodetskoe. In some locations, the fighting has not subsided to this day. In more than 1,000 days of full-scale war, the occupying army has captured less than 1% of Ukrainian territory. This is the statistic provided by Commander-in-Chief Syrsky. And this completely refutes the Kremlin's claims of major Russian successes on the front. After all, the main seizure of Ukrainian land by the aggressor country's army took place only in the first days of the full-scale invasion, after which it has essentially been stuck in place, as the numbers relentlessly show. More details ahead.
The Armada.
Day 1273 of the large-scale Russian-Ukrainian war. Almost 3.5 years of daily battles, artillery shelling, drone attacks, and thousands of casualties. But the result, if you look at the map of hostilities, speaks for itself. Moscow, which boasted it would take Kiev in 72 hours, has, after 1,010 days of bloody fighting, captured less than 1% of Ukrainian territory. These are the conclusions reached by deep state analysts.
Starting from November 12, 2022, the occupied area as of that date was 108,651 square kilometers. As of today, 114,493 square kilometers. The enemy has occupied 5,842 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. This amounts to 0.96% of the total area of the Ukrainian state within its internationally recognized borders. Deep state.
The Russians did indeed achieve significant operational successes, but that was in the first weeks of the invasion, when Ukraine was physically unprepared to face what was once the world's second-largest army, which was simultaneously pushing forward on all fronts. In those days, the enemy managed to capture Kherson, Mariupol, and parts of the Kyiv, Chernihiv, and Sumy regions.
Everyone realized that they needed to start digging in right away. At the very least, after losing the Kharkiv region, the Russian Federation clearly understood that victory couldn't be achieved on the move, so to speak. Well, from their side. If you want to hold your ground, you need to dig in. And all this digging in, all these positions, they leveled out all the major problems that existed at the start of the war. At first, Russia broke through our defenses in a massive way. Then Ukraine pushed the Russian Federation back, and after that, everyone shifted to more or less positional fighting, dugouts, trenches, forests, tree lines. And that's how the fighting is conducted.
But subsequent counter-offensives by the Ukrainian armed forces pushed the occupiers back by dozens of kilometers, turning the tide of the war. Since November 12, 2022, the front has stabilized. Russia is still trying to advance now, but not on such a large scale. The enemy is storming the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces, hoping to seize at least a bit of Ukrainian land. Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Kupiansk, Chasiv Yar, Robotyne, thousands of attempts to storm the trenches, but the advances are minimal, sometimes 300, sometimes 500 meters. Hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers have been lost, but the strategic picture has hardly changed. Now the enemy is conducting mainly local offensive actions, applying pressure, wearing down, destroying infantry and equipment. However, the Russian dictator is unable to seize significant territories.
Despite those losses, and his losses keep growing, every kilometer and every position captured costs him more and more killed and wounded each time. The statistics bear this out. First, their rate of advance has slowed down significantly. Second, their level of losses is extremely high. Yet they persistently try to achieve the goals they've set for themselves.
They lack resources, they lack strength, they lack capabilities. All those things they bragged about so much before the war turned out to be nothing. Why has there been a wave of generals being dismissed in the Russian Federation? This is dictator Putin's personal revenge against all the military generals who for many years convinced him that our weapons had no equal. They said everything was prepared, everything was great. But as it turned out of this multi-million, out of a million-strong army, only about 170,000 people were actually ready to fight at the very start of the war. That's it. The rest were not ready. There was no proper communication, no equipment, no sufficient ammunition. None of that was there. Everything had been sold off, everything had been stolen. And now this massive revenge, this huge punitive machine that punishes generals for this deception, once again shows that the Russian military machine is, for the most part, just a puff of smoke. Yes, there are people, yes, there are determined allies, Iran, North Korea, but the Russian Federation itself cannot cope with Ukraine.
Ukraine is already definitely the winner in this war. Even under conditions of shell shortages and the aggressor country's superiority in manpower and aviation, Ukrainian defenses remain resilient. The successes of the Russians are far less than what Kremlin propagandists claim. Their soldiers are being wiped out on the front lines by the tens of thousands. Their equipment burns on the battlefields, and the goals of the aggressor's army are collapsing under the blows of the Ukrainian army.
And here is another very telling story about the aggressor's army and their so-called military successes. At least 5 Russian conscripts died in the Kursk region after the aggressor country's Ministry of Defense had already loudly reported the supposed complete liberation of the region from the armed forces of Ukraine. And here a logical question arises. How could they have died if the Kursk region was supposedly already liberated from Ukrainian troops? And if it wasn't liberated, then why were conscripts in the combat zone? The answers are in our report.
Only professional soldiers are taking part in this operation. Officers and contract servicemen.
There are absolutely no conscripts at all, and we do not plan to involve them in any capacity.
They are not supposed to be there, yet they keep dying. After the supposed complete liberation of the Kursk region, at least 5 Russian conscripts died in the area. The publication Verstka reports that at least half a dozen young men died in the Kursk region after the command reported the region's liberation. Journalists gathered information from open sources, including relatives, friends, and former fellow servicemen.
He left from the military enlistment office in the city of Nefteyugansk to Kursk as a conscript. He wasn't on the special military operation. It was just regular conscript service.
This message was posted on social media by the relatives of Artem Borodin, who died 2 months ago. The 20-year-old had served only 6 months. Like many others, he did not have sufficient training, yet he was near the combat zone, where, according to the Russian command, there had long been no enemy presence and the situation was calm.
Many commanders make rash statements in hopes of advancing their careers, but it's the ordinary guys who have to pay for their words, often with their lives. Unfortunately, this practice is widespread.
One of the main reasons analysts cite for the deaths of conscripts in the Kursk region is sending them to patrol the border in an area where sabotage and reconnaissance groups from both sides are constantly active. The chances of survival for these young men, who were just schoolboys yesterday, are slim. For example, this is how the life of 22-year-old Mikhail Ulasenko from Noyabrsk was cut short. According to local television, he was drafted into service in November of last year. On May 31st, while carrying out an assignment, Ulasenko was killed by a landmine.
A conscripted serviceman has the same status as any other military personnel, whether a contract soldier or a mobilized one, in terms of rights and responsibilities. And he can very well, and as we see, they were indeed in the combat zone.
The same fate befell 18-year-old Ivan Nijegorodov from the village of Izvestnya Quarry in Perm Krai. He was drafted into service in the fall of last year. Already this year, on June 6th, a post with his photograph appeared in local social media groups.
He was diligently carrying out essential tasks to guard and defend the state border, and tragically died while bravely patrolling the remote border area of the Kursk region.
Since July 8th, 21-year-old Vladimir Zolotuev from the village of Kolbon in Zabaikalsky Krai, who was drafted into the army in November of last year, stopped making contact. On July 24th, the military commissar and the head of the Kolbon administration came to his mother and informed her that Vladimir had died defending the border of the Kursk region. He did not sign a contract, according to a local social media group. Dozens of mothers of Russian conscripts have already faced the same situation before.
I couldn't even imagine that a conscript would be sent there to fight. He only held the rifle twice, right? That was just for a photo. How is he supposed to go to war?
On July 13th, in the Kursk region, 20-year-old conscript Vladislav Borodin from the village of Karakulino in Udmurtia was killed, his mother told Verstka journalists. According to the woman, she was not told anything about the circumstances of her son's death. "No one is saying anything, we don't know anything," said the mother of the deceased. At the same time, while the boy was still in touch, like many other current conscripts, he said that they were not receiving any combat training.
All this time, while they were serving in the unit, we communicated with them daily, and everyone said the same thing. Everyone said they were being taught how to line up and march. Even when they were assigned to perimeter duty around the unit, they were given a dagger instead of a rifle because they were not trained.
At the same time, unlike the relatives of the deceased, the Russian command understands that the situation in the Kursk region still has not been brought under control, and a response to this has already followed. The scandalously notorious Russian Armed Forces General Alexander Lapin, who is blamed for the failure of the defense in the Kursk region, has been dismissed from the army.
The decree has not yet been published. We are waiting. If this is true, then the removal of such a general is highly symbolic. At the same time, information suggests he was not just removed, but dismissed from the Russian armed forces. Apparently, a thorough investigation is brewing in the Kursk region into all circumstances that led to the deaths of thousands.
Evgeny Nikiforov was appointed in his place, but so far, he has also failed to improve the situation in the Kursk region. The border as a whole still remains outside of Russia's control. At the same time, this is still not the zone of the so-called special military operation.
Let me emphasize, conscripted soldiers are not participating and will not participate in combat operations.
And officially, no combat operations are being conducted there, or the command has reported that everything is under control. In other words, this is one of the likely places where new conscripts may serve their mandatory military service.
And now we move to the Lyman direction of the front. The enemy army's bloody rampage continues here as well. In the Lyman direction, Russian invaders attacked the defense forces' positions 13 times near Kharkivka, Karpivka, Rydkodub, and Hrihorivka, as well as towards the settlements of Drobisheve, Yampil, and Kolodyazi. 8 clashes are still ongoing. At the same time, the Russian military-industrial complex is struggling with the production of Kh-59 and Kh-69 cruise missiles and is forced to manufacture low-quality substitutes instead of these high-tech and deadly missiles. Right now, we'll tell you more about this so-called process taking place in the enemy's lair.
The Kremlin is rapidly losing its air superiority. The Russian army has virtually run out of air-launched missiles. I don't even know, should we say it or not? Well, let's tell it. The main intelligence directorate of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense has published information that Russian enterprises involved in the production of Kh-59 and Kh-69 missiles are facing serious difficulties due to the sanctions imposed on Russia. In particular, 50 out of 116 companies are unable to deliver products for the production of these missiles on time.
Thousands of electronic components which are meant to improve lives and foster development are being turned by the aggressors into tools for killing. Their weapons depend on foreign components. Without them, they cannot continue to fight, occupy, and kill.
The production of missiles and other high-tech military equipment in the Russian Federation relies precisely on intermediaries who operate through shell companies.
And it seems that for the Kremlin, this scheme has finally been shut down. Without high-precision Western components, the military-industrial complex of the aggressor country is experiencing a colossal shortage. As a result, the occupiers have effectively lost all their stockpiles of medium-range air-launched missiles.
The Russian defense industry depends on Western technologies. This concerns not only components used during the assembly of key parts, but primarily in the manufacturing process itself. The Russian defense sector is dependent in the area of computer numerical control, or CNC technology, which is crucial.
Without software and the components themselves, nearly 40% of Russian companies involved in the production of Kh-59 and Kh-69 class missiles are being forced to shut down production or, at the very least, go on extended forced breaks, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine asserts. This, in turn, leads to a catastrophic shortage of medium-range missiles in the enemy's arsenal, a shortage that is unlikely to be replenished, military experts explain.
Production will be slower and it will be more expensive. It may also be of lower quality because it's impossible to guarantee what kind of parts will be used.
At first, the Kremlin wanted to replace Western components with Chinese ones. Fortunately, Putin is still on friendly terms with China. However, friendship is one thing, but business is business.
Chinese companies are unwilling to risk falling under new Western and especially American sanctions and therefore refuse to supply Russia en masse with the goods needed for its military-industrial complex.
It's no coincidence that there's a redirection, a reorientation toward the Chinese market. In other words, they are trying to replace Western technological equipment with cheaper copies produced by the People's Republic of China. But even in this case, the Russian Federation has faced the fact that China has imposed a ban on the supply of dual-use goods, primarily those intended for the Russian military-industrial complex. Therefore, we can say that at this point, the Russian side is facing truly critical issues regarding the feasibility of implementing its program to develop modern weaponry.
The acute shortage of components for the Russian military-industrial complex has even led to what is called missile cannibalism. This is when old systems from warehouses and museums are dismantled and their parts are cobbled together to make new missiles. However, even this is only a temporary measure. The Kremlin has virtually run out of both old Soviet missile engines and components for guidance systems. This isn't the first time something like this has happened to us. As a result, the Russian military-industrial complex has actively started replacing its own high-precision weapons, such as the Kh-59 and Kh-69 missiles, with cheaper and sometimes blatantly makeshift means of attack. These include the Dan-M and Banderol missiles. The latter is a weapon with a cruising speed within 600 kilometers, a flight range of less than 200, and virtually zero accuracy. Due to the lack of those very Western components, guidance systems for such weapons are almost non-existent. As for the Dan-M, the situation for the occupiers is even worse. In fact, it is essentially just an aerial target, not some new product created from scratch. Hence the catastrophically low effectiveness. However, lacking anything better, the Kremlin makes do with what it has and is ramping up mass production of at least this kind of weapon. Meanwhile, our defenders, as analysts explain, are already preparing to counter the new Russian challenges and are testing cheaper types of weapons to destroy Russian drones even as they approach.
And now, an analysis of the operational situation on the Toretsk sector of the front. The enemy is becoming more aggressive here as well. In the Toretsk direction, the Russians launched 8 assaults on the positions of Ukrainian units in the areas of Toretsk, Sherbinivka, and towards Oleksandr, Shultino, Pleshcheyevka, and Rusiniv Yar. One engagement is still ongoing. The defense of Ukrainian skies against enemy drones is about to receive a new technological boost. Ukraine is developing a new air-to-air air defense system, which is currently undergoing combat trials. Everything that is known about this new weapon for protecting Ukrainian airspace is covered in our next report.
Ukraine now has one more new solution for defending its skies. A domestic company has presented its own model of an air defense system. The system is capable of shooting down at least enemy drones from the air while scanning vast areas.
A participant in the Defense Innovation Cluster Maxon is developing an air-to-air air defense system with its own guidance system and high-speed interceptors to protect large perimeters. Its development is already undergoing combat trials in the Kyiv and Chernihiv regions.
Naturally, there are few details available about the new system. The development still remains classified. However, when talking about the air-to-air system class, it could refer to several engineering solutions at once. These include interceptor drones as well as UAVs equipped with strike capabilities.
We're talking about having a platform that allows us to carry air-to-air missiles, and at the same time we're not limited to just the R9s. We can also talk about the R-73, although for some reason everyone calls it a Soviet missile. In reality it was developed in the Soviet era, but it has been significantly modernized. So here we're saying that we've already found a comprehensive solution.
We're also actively developing the production of UAVs for intercepting enemy drones. The development announced by Minister Fedorov has its own guidance system, which means it could very well be a modernized drone that scans the sky on its own and, upon detecting a target, can identify, pursue, and destroy it.
And artificial intelligence plays a key role in all of this. There's no way around it nowadays. It handles both targeting and adaptation to different scenarios. There's a lot of fascinating stuff going on. So what lies ahead for us? First, we really need to train operators and scale up production. There's nothing new to say here, and nothing particularly ingenious to invent. This will provide good protection. They work in coordination with the General Staff and the Air Defense Forces. Naturally, this should and will operate not only in Kyiv.
Another crucial point in producing our own air defense systems is that Ukraine will not be dependent on the moods overseas or on the capabilities of our European partners. It was stated that the system is entirely domestic, assembled jointly by various Ukrainian companies, and therefore there should be no issues with components, repairs, or maintenance.
Importantly, the Maxon technology integrates solutions from other Brave One participants. This is exactly how the cluster ecosystem works. Companies that create effective solutions in different areas can combine them.
Analysts are sure that this will also help provide air defense forces with a sufficient number of new systems. Once the system is certified by the Ministry of Defense, it can easily be mass-produced through the state procurement system and manufactured in whatever quantity the army requires.
If there is a comprehensive grant system in place, if we can provide significantly more substantial funding to our domestic drone manufacturers, actually there are approximately 800 distinct companies currently working within our extensive military-industrial complex, and the vast majority of these are indeed private companies operating independently. That's how it works in the entire civilized world. In America, in European countries, in NATO, private manufacturers produce weapons, and they are ready to produce even more.
Ukraine's Ministry of Digital Transformation has already called the production of this system an event that could change the course of the war. All that's left is to wait for the results of the combat tests. Let me remind you, Ukrainian engineers have recently been developing new strike drones on a large scale, which will hunt down Shaheds. These drones operate on the same principle as air defense missiles. They detonate near enemy targets and hit them with shrapnel. Moreover, Ukraine has taken drone production volumes to a new level. At the moment, our defense industry is capable of producing about 10 million drones annually, including those equipped with artificial intelligence.
We cannot counter the enemy with the same amount of equipment, weaponry, or manpower as the Russian Federation does. That is why we have chosen the path of technological advancement.
Well then, now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Novopavlivka sector of the front. The Russian world continues here as well to destroy, kill, and maim. On the Novopavlivka direction, the enemy attempted to break through the defenses of our troops 19 times in the areas of the settlements of Zelenie High, Voskresenka, Oleksandrivrad, Malevka, and Timirivka. 7 clashes are still ongoing. The defense forces of Ukraine have achieved successes in several directions in Donetsk region and Sumy region, liberating a number of settlements and inflicting significant losses on the Russian occupiers. In recent days, the enemy has lost a considerable amount of equipment and weaponry. 8 tanks have been destroyed or damaged, 6 Russian armored fighting vehicles, 103 units of automotive and motor equipment, 1 multiple rocket launcher system, 18 artillery pieces, and 91 UAVs of various types. For more details on what is happening on the battlefield, see our military overview.
The long-awaited counteroffensive by the Ukrainian armed forces has begun. Our defenders have launched an offensive in the Sumy region. The advance of Ukrainian troops is being recorded in the Slobozhansk direction. The defense forces have recaptured at least 2.5 kilometers of territory from the occupiers, reports the General Staff of Ukraine. Thus, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to establish full fire control over the enemy's logistical routes. As a result, the delivery of ammunition, the evacuation of Russian troops, and the reinforcement of Russian forces with reserves have all been disrupted. As a result, active fighting is now taking place near the villages of Alexevka and Yunakovka, where the enemy, albeit slowly, is retreating.
In the North Slobozansky direction, Ukrainian soldiers continue active operations to destroy the enemy and liberate our settlements. In particular, active operations are underway in the areas of Alexeyevka and Yudakovka in the Sumy region. The fight continues. Glory to Ukraine!
However, the occupiers have not given up hope of breaking through the Ukrainian defenses somewhere. So for the first time in a long while, the Russians launched a tank assault on Kupiansk. But the operation failed. The Ukrainian armed forces put up a fierce resistance. And even though the occupiers threw their tanks, armored fighting vehicles, and infantry into the battle, it was all in vain. The enemy was detected on the left bank of the Oskil River, particularly in the direction of Lyman Pershai to Kupiansk. There, the enemy tried to break through the Ukrainian defenses using 2 tanks and 3 armored fighting vehicles. However, the Ukrainian armed forces put up a worthy resistance, damaging and destroying the equipment and also eliminating almost all of the Russian personnel.
Basically, for now, according to preliminary results, it seems the situation has been brought under control. With this breakthrough, they are gradually pushing them back, that is, reclaiming the territory.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian tanks are hitting the occupiers without missing. In one of the settlements in the Donetsk region, where the 3rd Army Corps is holding the line, our tank broke through the enemy's defenses almost effortlessly. Despite being hit by an FPV drone on its armor, the Ukrainian Armed Forces vehicle quickly takes up position and opens fire on the enemy at close range. As a result, the crew manages to complete the mission and promptly return to their position without any losses. And here we see the work of the 4 Post Brigade's UAV operators. Their drone precisely struck the occupiers' equipment and personnel in the Vovchansk direction. After the strike, the enemy suffered losses and was forced to abandon their positions. Even well-fortified enemy positions do not save the Russian army from Ukrainian drones. Thus, aerial reconnaissance pilots detected the movement of an enemy tank and pinpointed its hiding place. In 2 passes, the enemy vehicle was destroyed. The first drone tore off the camouflage net and the second struck the enemy IFV directly. The occupiers simply had no chance to escape. Our defenders also dominate the skies. In the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to bring down at least 4 enemy strike and reconnaissance UAVs. As a result, against the backdrop of real failures at the front, the occupiers have resorted to their favorite Kremlin tactic of fake victories. Soldiers of the Russian army are filming staged videos of capturing settlements. Thus, Russian propaganda is actively employing a new tactic of spreading disinformation, staged victories to create the illusion of success at the front. To do this, the enemy sends small groups carrying Russian flags to bypass the positions of Ukrainian defenders. Some of them manage to infiltrate certain settlements and record short videos, supposedly confirming the capture of new territories. These videos are used for triumphant reports to the Kremlin leadership and are spread in the media to put pressure on Ukrainian society. However, Kremlin propaganda tries to keep quiet about such incidents. For example, last night drones attacked the Lysky railway station in the Voronezh region. As can be seen from eyewitness videos, a fire broke out at the site upon impact. The governor of the Voronezh region, albeit reluctantly, confirmed the drone attack several hours after the incident, noting that as a result of drone debris falling, a power line at the railway station was damaged and train traffic was delayed. We are talking about the Lysky station, which is considered one of the largest railway hubs of the Southeastern Railway in Russia. That's all for today.
But very soon on Front News, there will be new unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war, obtained so that you know the truth. This was Vladimir Timoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.